The Change Mode Podcast. Permission to change the world? Granted. The Change Mode Podcast is lovingly prodded and packaged by the DevRelers at Upsun, a platform as a service powered by platform.sh. My name is Marine Gandhi. I am a part of said team, and I will be your host for today's episode of the Change Mode Podcast, or as I personally call it in my mind, the chmodcast, but please don't repeat it to the others. As you can probably tell by my accent, I am not a native English speaker. I am actually French, and I hope you will understand me clearly. But I'm pretty sure there will be some grammatical mistakes and weird accents here and there, so for this I apologize in advance. And that is why we have a text transcript of every episode. As a heads up also, most of the guests this season are also not native English speakers, so you will get a variety of accents, and I hope it will be fine for everybody. Also, I'm sure you can hear I am pretty obviously still a little bit sick, so it's harder for me to speak clearly because my nose does not cooperate, so sorry about that. Okay, let's begin by addressing what I know is in your head right now, and that is, oh no, not another podcast. And I get it, I really do. I know there are lots of options out there, especially in the tech industry. And you are probably wondering why we decided to make another one. And that's actually a very legit question. So let me give you a little background. As I said, this podcast is made by a DevRel team. And as you probably guess, part of our job is to attend conferences and talk to people. And that's pretty amazing, to be honest with you. But the point is, we get to travel to these amazing events and meet a lot of interesting people there. And I'm not just talking about the speakers at the event, but also all the great folks in the audience. And we realized pretty quickly that we were having fascinating conversation with these people, discovering amazing open source projects every time. And that's it. We learned about these because we get to attend all these events as part of our jobs. But what about all the developers that never get to travel, that never get to attend these conferences? In a way, there's a big chance they will never have this fascinating conversation and learn about these great open source projects that are on the smaller scale. And so, as open source lovers ourselves, we decided it was only fair to share the spotlight with these amazing people and what they're doing for the greater good, right? And so this podcast is a way for us to highlight these projects and their maintainers and maybe inspire you to take the next step in your open source journey. So here it will be less about the technical aspects and more about the people, where they studied, what they studied, how they decided to join open source projects or create their own, what they're working on at the moment, what it brought them to engage in this community work. And yeah, basically, you will notice very quickly that no matter the language or the technology, some stories are very similar, but all of them are also unique, and they can inspire you in different ways. So here you have it. That's the reasoning behind this podcast, and I really hope that you will find it interesting and it will be as exciting for you as it is for us. Okay, so you made it this far and you clicked on this podcast to begin with. So you are probably an open source lover and you already know the name of the guest. So there's no point in wasting any more time. Our guest today is Ryan Weaver, and I'm going to read his biography from his GitHub profile. So Ryan is a Symfony doc lead, writer at SymfonyCasts, Symfony evangelist, husband, and a dad. And as you will hear in this interview, it will all come into play. I had the pleasure of meeting Ryan at SymfonyCon Brussels in December last year, 2023, and it was a great conversation. Actually, my initial goal for this podcast was to be around 30 minutes interview, but it was impossible because we had so much to talk about. Of course, coming from a PHP background myself, I already knew who Ryan was and I've been following him for a while. But it's always different to actually meet the person. And that was the perfect opportunity because we were both in the same city at the same time. Also, I must say, as a developer, I think it's pretty hilarious that my first episode in this podcast is about documentation. And I think, especially in open source project, that's a critical part of our work to maintain this documentation. So I hope you will find it interesting. I found it fascinating, and I really think that people like Ryan are amazing to follow and learn from. So, without further ado, this is the interview. Hey, Ryan.
Hey.
We're at SymfonyCon in Brussels. Yay! And I'm taking this opportunity to steal you away for a little time to chat.
A little quiet time.
Exactly. So thank you so much for taking time with me. I'm super excited. I've been following you from afar, I think, for a long time. So it's great to actually talk to you.
Yeah. And you said you have a Drupal background.
Yes.
So I've been kind of following Drupal.
Ooh.
I've been to a couple of Drupal conferences.
So
I know. Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
So I know.
now I'm excited.
I know all about that scene, and it's great.
Interesting. So we'll have further conversations, I think. But for now, maybe for people who don't really know about PHP World, Symfony World, and they might not know who you are, so do you mind introducing yourself? What you do, that kind of stuff?
So I work on the core team on Symfony Framework. Symfony Framework is a framework in PHP that you build web applications with, but it also is a bunch of independent libraries. So even people that aren't using Symfony like Drupal or like Laravel, turns out they're actually built on top of lots of little pieces of Symfony. So I work on the Symfony core team, and I focus a lot on documentation. So SymfonyCasts is the screencasting site basically for Symfony. So I work a lot on making tutorials for that, and then quite a bit in other parts of the open source PHP and Symfony ecosystem.
Nice. So I'm interested in that. How did you begin working in open source? What was your journey here? Did you just start by accident?
Yes,
Was there some
sort of.
definitive time?
Is it always kind of by accident? It's a different accidental story for everyone.
Yeah, usually it's just someone ropes you in.
Yeah. Actually, yes, it is exactly that. So a long time ago in Symfony one time, I was writing these blog posts because that's what you do. You're like a nerd and you figure stuff out and you write a blog post. And then when Symfony 2 came out, Symfony 2 was a major rewrite, major version. It was a very, very major version. And the lead developer of Symfony, his name is Fabian. He needed somebody to write the documentation. So exactly that. I don't remember how he did it, but to me, I was just a person that didn't exist, just a community member, right? Just using Symfony. And but if you are writing blog posts or you're posting somewhere, if you're sharing something, or even doing a little bit of open source, turns out that a lot of the times the big maintainers, they actually are noticing. So at some point, Fabian noticed and he asked, do you want to write the documentation for Symfony 2? So of course it was like, yes, that's amazing. And of course, in hindsight, he was probably like, yes, this is amazing. Just giving that job to somebody else.
Amazing. So it's actually Fabien Potencier who
Yeah. In English we say voluntold. You're not volunteer. Somebody voluntold you. They said you should do this.
Smart. It's his fault.
Yep.
Okay, duly noted.
Yep. And then it snowballs, right? So
exactly. You start with a little thing and then you get known for it. It's too late.
Yep. And then you get excited because you're like,
So what you're saying is basically you were already contributing in a way because you were writing blog posts. So to you, is that not already open source contribution?
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, it is open source contribution. I should remember that because we get lots of people that ask, how can I contribute to open source? And you think code, right?
Obviously.
But that's not always easy, especially on a library that is as robust and big as Symfony is, it's like, oh, what are they going to do? Go solve this super crazy edge case bug in this class that no one's been able to figure out for 8 years. So that's such a good point to remember that contributing can just be you just posting on your blog or posting on X or Twitter or whatever you call it, whatever your social media platform is. And for example, in Symfony, I actually wish we had more of that. Wish there were more people that were just posting little solutions, because that's really how we cobble together the patterns as a language. So I was just having a conversation with someone a few minutes ago about sort of the difference between having tools and then knowing the patterns to solve those. And you're absolutely right. It's the individuals in the community via blog posts or other things that are taking those tools and saying, hey, I had this problem and this is how I solved it. And that information then kind of permeates the ecosystem, and somebody else tries it and they build on it and they make it better and they do another blog post. So yeah, it's totally open source. I love it. I never thought about that before. That is open source and a super important part of it.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing I love about PHP and Drupal, of course, in particular. But you don't only care about code, you care about any type of contribution, and it can be documentation, which is something that is so often overlooked, but so helpful. This is the entry for new people. And what we want as a community is to foster these relationships and get new people excited, right? So yeah, I think 100% if you're taking time out of your day to write a blog post, you're doing open source. Good for you.
That blog post can be one paragraph and 2 code blocks.
Yes. How many times have I seen a major contributor or something saying, well, you know what, like today I was stuck and I Googled it and I found a blog post and it solved my problem. And it was my own blog post from 10 years ago.
Exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's not just for other people, it's also for you, like a memory thing. Okay, exciting. So blog post, then documentation of Symfony 2, which is, I'm guessing, a huge task. Did you have help? How did it work?
Yeah, not at first, but it didn't matter because I didn't have a kid yet. So open source was my kid. But yeah, that was a huge job. And over time, I did get help. This is, great thing. Like other people have shown up. I don't even work on the Symfony documentation anymore. There's a Symfony team of about 4 people. But over time, they started working on it more and more as I started working on other things. But the way that I originally got started in Symfony, the very, very short version of that is I was a young, bad developer. And Symfony had great documentation. So I needed that. We talked about the entry point. It didn't matter. The code behind Symfony and how it was built didn't matter at all to me. It was not accessible to me. If you had just given me the code, I would have not known what to do with it. Not accessible at all. The documentation was accessible and the result was accessible. The documentation was clear, said you do A, B, and C, and you get this great result. And so the reason I use Symfony is because someone else opened that door for me and let me in. If they hadn't, I would not have been able to figure it out myself. So when Symfony 2 came along, it was my chance to try to be that, and hopefully I did a decent enough job for the next generation of developers, because I was like, this has got to be accessible. I want to invite those people in. And it's still definitely the motivating factor when I think about documentation or screencasts is want to give you the red carpet experience to take you from where you are and invite you in and kind of empower you.
So did it start as giving back for you, or were you already passionate about sharing and education and, building knowledge?
Yeah, I think it was. I think I like to give back. It feels good, but it's really just nerdier than that. It's fun to open up the code and see how the things connect.
Oh, okay.
And so and that takes time. And if everyone that's using a technology has to open up the code and connect the dots, that's a very, very poor use of everyone's time. So we need someone, or really many someones, to go back to your blog post. Maybe you opened up a core class and you found just how 2 things connect and you wrote that tiny blog post. So it's many of those things so that other people don't have to make those connections, because it's not a good use of time.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like us all driving cars versus to the same location versus us hopping on a bus
Sure.
and the bus takes us to that location. Like that's how we want to use our resources. So I think that's the motivating thing. It's fun to do that. And as soon as you do, you're like, if I could just put those thoughts out there, even in some small format, then we've built a brick. We've kind of built a brick, and the next people can start on top of that brick, which is really, really cool feeling.
That's amazing. Okay. So teamwork and
teamwork, community teamwork.
seeing, like nerdier attraction of understanding what's happening under the hood and making it easy for other people to understand.
Especially if you're not the one that built the library.
Yes.
You get to get inside someone's head. You know,
Yeah.
in our case, it was that code is written by Fabian,
I
who
was
was
gonna say payback.
a much better developer than I am, or certainly was back then. So it's cool to like get in there and just see what their brain did. What are they doing? How does the code work? I don't know how I would have solved this problem. How did they solve this problem? It's just a cool feeling.
Cool. So did you start contributing code as well, or?
I did. I don't remember exactly when, but it's I guess it kind of on the same philosophy. It bothers me when we're doing things over and over again. So it may have been around, it didn't matter, Symfony 3 or so. We have a code generator in Symfony. Once upon a time, it was called Generator Bundle. Now it's called Maker Bundle. And the old one after a while, it didn't like it. And so we all have this feeling, right? So you kind of have these ideas of like, I can make this better. And if I make this better, then other people are going to be able to generate better things and get their work done faster. So it's just little by little, it's like, okay, I'll make this Maker Bundle that generates a controller for you and generates this other thing for you. And then over time, it generates more things for you, entities and commands and these other things and other things. So what what keeps me up at night is when we have a user experience, a developer experience that isn't good. So again, it kind of goes back to that red carpet. So when I write documentation or I write screencasts, one of the challenges is I will try to take us down a path of building some feature, and I'll hit something and I'll say, I can teach that, but that experience is terrible.
Yeah.
I don't want to show you these 7 steps. This is awful. And so it's like this point of, do I stop now and try to go fix that? And so that's a lot of times what happens is it's pain-driven development. So I want to be able to give you this beautiful experience. I want there to be a beautiful experience of building this feature. And so we've kind of find those pain points over time. So Maker Bundle.
So you're removing friction.
Yeah, that's a good way. Removing friction. Yeah.
I love this because actually you're still doing docs. Because when you make like a Maker Bundle is what generates code for you. So you don't have to worry about what do I add as a use or include or whatever. And if you're a newbie, that's super helpful that you can generate this controller and see how it's supposed to be done. And then that's teaching you a lot. So to me, that's really funny because you're actually just doing documentation again without contribution.
Yeah, it's a different way of doing it.
Interesting.
That's a good point.
No, okay. But if you want to explain something and you realize it's too complex and it should be done in a much easier way, then that's where you're going to contribute code as well. Okay.
I think you're in a unique opportunity if you are the person writing the documentation or doing the screencasts or writing that little blog post. That's the times you experience that. And it's the people that are creating these libraries, they're not building the same types of applications with it that you are. Sometimes they're not even building applications with it. That's true. Sometimes these, any technology, the people that build it, that technology just becomes so important and so big. The only thing they work on is that technology. They're not actually using it. You're the one that's using it. So you're the one that experiences those pain points. So if I took a pain point that I've experienced, for example, to the lead developer of Symfony, Fabian, I almost definitely, he had no idea that was a pain point.
Sure.
So it takes time to fix things or document things, but there's also this entire other area of discovery, like even realizing that there are these hundreds or thousands of developers out there that are all silently suffering this problem. So if you're suffering this problem and you have the ability to not have it be silent anymore, say, you know what, I'm going to write a blog post about this, or this is finally a problem that I'm going to try to create a pull request to solve, to smooth out. That's a really powerful thing. It's not as simple as we know what the pain points are. We just can't find time. It's like they're blind spots.
Of
Really.
course. Real life experience.
Real life experience
It's just-
exposes
yeah, exactly.
those rough spots.
But then that makes me think as well, wouldn't you say a useful contribution would be to just open a ticket? Is that something that works well for
Yes,
the
it's- I mean,
documentation as
Yes,
well?
that is something. It's like it's the smallest entry point,
Yeah.
and if it includes details about exactly what's going on, and ideally even maybe what you think the right solution would be, then I do think that opening an issue is a good thing. And sometimes the maintainers might say, "Yeah,
Mm.
can you open a pull request?"
And that's how you get into open
That's how you get
source.
into it. And I get it. It can be scary. So opening an issue is a good way to you can validate your issue, because I know
Yeah.
it can be scary sometimes to say like, I have this issue. I'm gonna create a pull request and solve it, because you think like you're gonna open that and they're gonna be like, this is terrible. So
Yeah,
I get it. You open an issue, it's a little bit a little bit less scary.
Sure. Especially when you admire people, you think they're so good that you can never compare. But that's not how open source works. Actually.
No, they're just really busy.
Exactly.
They really want you to contribute.
They don't want to judge you.
No, they don't.
Okay, so interesting beginning, but I feel like I've heard this story before with other people. That's how usually how you get into open source. So how did you go from core contribution to actually SymfonyCasts? What was it? Your idea? What sparked it?
So when Symfony 2 first came out, we were doing lots of in-person trainings.
Mhm.
And again, it was kind of this accessibility thing. In-person trainings are not accessible. They're great. They're not accessible to the person that's developing these small applications in their own company, or even a company that has 5 developers. So it was, we had to find a way to take that experience and package it in a way that was affordable to the normal people. It's basically as simple as that. And I'm happy that we were able to turn it into a company, and that company helps also fund Symfony's open source. So some of the money from SymfonyCasts actually goes back and funds Symfony. I love that.
Yeah.
Ultimately came from, we have to give this product and this experience of walking someone through kind of in person in a way that they can afford it. And along the way, like one of the things that we do in SymfonyCasts, which I'm really happy about, it was a risk when we did it, but it worked out. We got lucky, is because I'm open source, right? I want to give everything away for free.
Sure.
My wife is the one that actually wants to pay for our house and our food. She's the one that's good at that kind of thing.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I just want to make the videos for free and give them away. Like, can't this work? Can't we just do everything for free? No, unfortunately not. So we do give the scripts and the code blocks away for free. So it's this nice balance, because I want the wall to be low,
Sure.
and I want some of the wall to not be there at all. I want at least some access to the content, because that's really what it's about. It's about our technology as Symfony, and we want to help push the ecosystem forward. And of course, we need to make a living at the same time when we do that. This is the classic problem of open source. So that's the balance that we found for doing that.
Yeah, and I thank you for that, because it helped me a lot in my dev years, for sure. No, but yeah, getting paid for your work is a big question.
Big question in open source these days.
Of course, Symfony is doing well on that front with 4 paid developers, and also the PHP Foundation now, 2 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's promising. I hope we can make a better environment for everyone.
I hope so too. And Drupal Foundation is one of the older versions of that. For people that don't know, that's existed forever and been able to pay initiatives. I mean, I think that's one of the things I've always admired from Drupal, for example, is they're like, oh, we decided that this organization, which is really kind of an open source-ish entity, it's not tied to a company, as a community, we've decided that we really need to fix this part of Drupal. And it was always really nice to me where it wasn't like, we need to fix this really important part of Drupal that thousands of companies are using. And so who wants to volunteer?
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, there is a part of that. But if it's important enough, it was like, okay, let's actually put money to this. We'll have 3 developers. Here's how much money we have. Here's how much time let's have. And of course, there's going to be open source contributors also, but let's actually invest in it. I think that's really cool. So seeing like the PHP Foundation is awesome.
Yeah,
and,
it's exciting.
and being able to see open source projects that have been able to monetize so that they can actually invest resources is super important.
Absolutely. And, for Drupal or whichever project, it's really important to not be tied to a single company, I think. But also, I very strongly feel like companies should give back for sure. So you mentioned that a piece of the revenue from SymfonyCast goes back to the Symfony project. For us, obviously, I'm working at Platform SH. If you host a Symfony project on platform, we also give back to the Symfony project
That's right.
a piece
And
of
we
what
do
you
that.
pay. So, it's, I think you're sponsored or we're sponsoring also open source projects. That's
Yep.
another way to, give back. So it's important. It's the little things, but when everybody does it, it makes a big difference, right?
It does, yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned, obviously, I have to ask you, you mentioned your kid earlier, and of course, not everybody is at SymfonyCon right now, but you brought your kid with you.
He's here.
That's pretty amazing. I've met with a few people that were like, whoa, they recruit them really young. How old is your kid?
My kid is 7. His name is Beckett,
Oh,
and he's 7, and this is his first symphony conference.
wow.
And it's a great environment. There's so many parents here. They're not here with their kids, but they see a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
This great community feeling of like, I'm gonna go talk to that kid. Or
Exactly.
there's someone here, and actually he's been doing this for years. With the 1 or 2 kids that end up coming to the conference, he brings balloons. He makes balloon animals.
Yes, I
It
saw that.
came out of his pocket, and he's like, "Oh, here we go. Here's my balloon that I keep in my pocket for just such an occasion." And then he like makes a balloon animal, and then my son is wearing the balloon animal like a hat, and he's walking through the crowded vendor area, and like no one can see him except that he has this giant hat on. So people are like, "What is this? What is happening?" It's just this kid walking through here with this giant balloon hat on. So it's been really fun. It is also a challenge because we are talking to so many people.
Of course.
But it's cool for him to see people and like introduce him to people. He was just asking me this morning. He's like, "No, which one is called Scoop?" So in the PHP community, there's a guy named Scoop, and he's like relatively famous. So he's like, "Which one's Scoop?" Because he thinks that's a cool sounding name.
That's nice.
So it's been super fun. It's just nice that we know we can bring him. He was invited to the speaker dinner.
Oh,
even
yeah,
though
yeah,
he's
yeah.
Really not speaking.
Saw him.
Yeah.
So there are 2 kids, right? I saw them.
Yep, Alexander, his 5-year-old is here. So we have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old here.
That's amazing. It's great to be able to share that with your kids. But also, since you mentioned it, I'm going to ask, how does it affect your ability to do open source? Because, of course, now it's part of your work through
Yeah.
SymfonyCast, but I'm guessing you also do volunteering time as well. But with kids, it's a different story, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it goes back to the kind of the funding model of open source. It's like pre-kids. If somebody doesn't have kids yet and they're just a nerd for programming, that's the people where you're going to get the free work from. And if everyone in the world were single and didn't have kids and liked to program in their free time, probably the like actual open source model of let's all just do this in our free time and nobody makes any money, it probably works.
Yeah,
But having kids is like when reality strikes. And
exactly.
when you have a technology that suddenly all the maintainers have kids, okay, that free time is gone.
Obviously.
So that's where the actual monetization comes in handy. So if I didn't have SymfonyCasts and to help me pay for the time, that just wouldn't happen.
Of
Because I have my open source now happens between the 9 and 5 workday, and the only reason I'm doing it there is because at SymfonyCasts we've decided to invest a certain amount of resources so my time can go to working on Symfony. Because you're right, there isn't time. There's not eating dinner and then coding from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. for free anymore. Don't get me wrong, I would do that.
Because you're a nerd.
Because I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, it's okay if you do not want to do that. That means you
Exactly.
have a different hobby, and that's
Exactly.
great. My wife works at SymfonyCasts. She's our front end developer. And the last thing she wants to do from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. is work on coding. She wants to knit.
I know.
Yeah.
I
That's
know.
her jam.
I get
That's
that.
probably healthier.
More and more, I just want to unplug and do something physical that I can touch and is finally finished at some point. Stop thinking and doing. So I get
what do
that.
you like to do? Do you
Yeah,
to ask it
lots
to
of
turn
things.
on you?
I'm more into music and
Okay.
some other stuff, but
Cool.
definitely, I'm feeling the urge. I want to start pottery classes.
Yeah, cool.
We'll see if I can fit that in my schedule,
Uh-huh.
but for sure, it must help that your wife is in the same type of work that what you're doing, right?
Yeah, it does help. Yeah. So she gets it. So there's a little more patience for when
Sure.
things get crazy.
Mhm.
Because things do get crazy before Symfony releases, things get crazy. So like everyone else, I struggle with finding that balance and not having my 9 to 5 or whatever turn into 7 to 7. So she has some understanding when those things do happen. Like before a conference. Things get a little crazy before a conference.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you want to share with your kid. Is it also part of this whole education, sharing knowledge thing? Do you want to share that with your kids? Do they show any interest for dev?
He shows no interest in developing at all. But it's about sharing. So I can't tell, I'm from the United States. So for us, it's about sharing, like, you're going to meet people that speak other languages, because for better or worse, other than Spanish, which still isn't that common, I live in the middle of the United States.
Yeah.
So it's fairly homogenous.
Yeah.
So coming here and being like, yeah, this person's from this country, speaks that language. This person's from this other country and speaks that language. And you see, they're all friendly and they're all normal and they all want to play with you and talk with you. So that was part of the factor of, like, let's bring him and throw him in and just give him this worldly experience.
Yeah.
Let's ride the train.
Yes.
For an American, very big deal. Very big deal. I rode the train and switched 2 times and didn't make any mistakes.
Wow.
I know. So yeah, it's like, do things like that, and you're riding the metro here, and so yeah, it's been not development. I think he's more visual than I am.
But yeah, this community experience is really something, right?
The community experience. He's like meeting our friends, and he really feels part of it. Because we set him up to, said, you're going to be part of the SymfonyCasts team.
Yeah.
But also because then he gets here and we take him to the speaker dinner, and everyone's like,
everyone's saying hi.
Saying hi. And one of the first things I said, several people have said, is said, oh, Beckett, you don't know me, but we all know you.
Yeah.
I mean, what a feeling for a 7-year-old to have this group of adults say that to
He's
him.
a mascot.
Yeah, it's a mascot. He's just famous. So
some of my colleagues asked me to ask you about your kid, because they say you're always talking about
I was talking about Beckett.
And I get it. It's really fun. So do you have time, or have you ever contributed to other projects, or are you really focused on Symfony?
Really focused on Symfony. So yeah, the answer is really yes. But I'm really focused on Symfony because, again, it kind of goes back to that smooth red carpet experience. So when I have contributed to other projects, it's things that are part of the greater Symfony ecosystem. So for example,
adjacent, yeah.
What's that?
Adjacent.
Adjacent, exactly. So for example, we happen to use in Symfony, you can use whatever you want in Symfony, but this is not about Symfony. But anyways, one of our recommended front-end JavaScript tools in Symfony happen to be the same JavaScript and front-end tools as Ruby on Rails. So like, I have actually started to get into the Ruby on Rails community, not actually the Ruby on Rails part, but the
common parts.
Yeah, their JavaScript libraries that they maintain.
Cool.
So issues, pull requests, and it's been cool. It's a whole new group of people.
Sure.
And actually, going back to sharing ideas, so having a set of tools is cool. Being able to see how to use them is much better. So in Symfony, I realized we have these tools that are also being used by this other community. So I went over to the other community and I watched their screencasts. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is how you're supposed to use this tool. I've been doing it all wrong. It was so cool to have such a great win to say, we're going to use the same technology as this other group. And suddenly, because of that, I got access to all these new resources and new ideas and new people. And it was really cool. So I do keep in the Symfony ecosystem, but it's great when the Symfony ecosystem can be less and less of an island and more and more of web development. And actually, Drupal, right? This is something that Drupal did starting 6 years ago or so. It said, let's be less of an island and more of just more of just our code's going to look like PHP code. So it's not Drupal, it's like just PHP in general.
Modern PHP.
Just modern PHP. So I love whenever we can do something, when we can make things less Symfony specific and more just general like that.
And that's what we were saying about onboarding people. The experience for us as a community was also about removing the friction of needing to know all the little, what we call
Drupalisms.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I have a whole talk about that. So, but yeah, it's about making that experience more something people already know, like creating an issue, doing PRs on GitLab, that type of stuff that we all had custom things for that before. But now if you're just used to open source in general, you can open a pull request very easily for a little thing that you noticed, and you don't have to be part of the community and have all the lingo to get it. So it's
hard
really
to-
important. Yeah.
It's hard to recognize those things. It's to kind of be reminded of those things.
Yeah.
We get so used to them.
Exactly.
And then you're like, hey, y'all know you're doing this weird, right?
Yeah.
No one else does it this way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's good to have your own thing if it makes sense.
Yeah.
But in this case, it didn't. It was more work. That's the power of open source. Well, why reinvent the wheel again and again, right?
Yeah.
Is do something, share it with people, and they will help you maintain it. That's magic. So yeah, you're expanding your horizon, but still being special.
I love PHP. I love
Yeah.
Symfony. I love JavaScript also.
That's weird.
That's the system. Have
No,
you
I'm
seen the
kidding,
new?
I'm
Have you seen modern JavaScript? They've removed so much of the weird.
I know we're getting the same jokes about PHP, right?
Oh, that's so true.
Say,
So true.
oh,
That's
PHP,
fair. That's fair.
duh. Yeah, have you seen new versions of PHP?
Yeah,
Come on, it's not
actually
the
pretty
same.
cool. You're totally right.
Yeah,
JavaScript's the same.
I get that all the time with Drupal. So it's a little
Oh yeah,
snort.
Drupal. ugh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're like,
But the
actually,
developer experience has improved
Mm-hmm.
tremendously. So yeah, so it's really interesting for me now that SymfonyCast is more of a company. Is
Mm-hmm.
it possible to contribute? Do you accept contribution to the actual SymfonyCast projects? Or
You don't
yeah,
actually. That's an interesting thing. And I
no,
think,
but would you need it? Because maybe you don't actually, since you're working on it.
yeah, no, it's turns out it's hard to write documentation of
Yes.
that size.
Mm-hmm.
That's again why I say, like, if you want to do your blog post that's 2 sentences, do it. That's
Mhm.
that's a great thing. But people, I've just found in practice, people don't create large articles.
Yeah,
It's just a lot of work. I think it's intimidating.
sure.
We've seen that on the Symfony documentation. We get lots of great contributions for small parts. You rarely get somebody, you do, but you rarely get somebody that like wrote the entire big section for some missing component. So I don't know if it's for better or worse. Yeah, creating screencasts is hard.
Yeah. So it would be more like a specialty kind of thing. You would specialize on it and just always do that because you need to. It's a knowledge base as well, right? You need to really know where everything is.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody's listening to this in the Symfony community and wants to do a screencast,
Sure.
yeah. If we had to find the right person, be like, yes, that's just more spreading knowledge, but you have to take someone that's comfortable with recording their own voice, all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
So I was going to ask you, how do you decide what should live in the documentation and what should be in the screencasts?
Yeah, it's a complicated thing. The screencasts augment the official documentation, but I mean, to be honest with you, with our business model, there's almost a conflict of interest.
Yeah,
I am paid to make the screencast, not to work on the
sure.
documentation.
Obviously.
Yeah. So the nice thing about the screencasts are that we can be opinionated. So with the documentation, we need to be a little bit more neutral. We don't want to be boring and give you too much detail, but we kind of
Yeah.
need to cover all the different use cases. And then with the screencast, I can be like, yeah, but you should actually do it this way. So because it's not the Symfony official way.
Sure.
It's like, this is what Ryan says, and it doesn't mean that's the only way of doing it. So I think we just get to go into more detail inside of the screencasts. And also it just goes back to learning styles.
Yeah.
Some people do not like screencasts at all. And I'm
Yeah.
like, cool. Which is also why we put the scripts and
Exactly.
code blocks below.
Accessibility. I can search the
Accessibility.
text.
Yeah. So you
It's
don't like
great.
the screencast, great.
Yeah.
You have the script and the code blocks right below.
Yes.
Historically, I haven't been a screencast person. I've actually become one over
Sure.
time. But I was like, that was me. I'm making the screencast and I don't usually watch them.
Yeah, but sometimes you just want to be able to copy and paste the snippet.
Yeah, you're like,
Right.
yeah, okay. In this moment, I wasn't actually wanting to watch a 10-minute video on how
Exactly.
to do this. I kind of already know. I just needed that one little snippet inside of there.
And you're more maybe hands-on, like it's very much tutorials, like the Bigfoot
Yeah,
seeing.
yeah. It's much, yeah. It's
what-
we get to like kind of create features instead of documentation needs to kind of cover how things are done. So yeah, it's not really a great answer to other than honestly, as long as things stay quality, when it comes to open source documentation,
Sure.
the more the merrier. We rarely have times where we're like, we don't have, or we have too much documentation. So, try to cover everything inside the Symfony documentation, then we can take them down a more personal experience with the screencast.
So that's maybe a trick question. So, but what about translation? Is the documentation bound to stay in English forever?
Probably, and maybe it doesn't matter anymore. That's a really good point. So accessibility is really important. The Symfony 1 and maybe early Symfony 2 was translated into multiple languages. And the problem is that documentation is so fluid. And so what happens when somebody adds 2 sentences?
Yeah.
And
No.
now you would have to have, if you did have it translated into multiple languages, you would have to have a process for that to automatically create some sort of an issue with maybe a checklist of the languages that aren't done. The reason I say maybe it doesn't matter anymore is just because the translation tools are getting so good. I think that's, for better or worse, probably the answer, and probably not even long term, probably pretty soon, that you can just translate the things into Spanish or whatever language, and it actually does a good job, right? We've been able to automatically translate things for a while, but it did a bad job. It doesn't do a bad job anymore. In SymfonyCasts, we actually translate our scripts and subtitles into Spanish.
Yes.
Well, we're going to add other languages soon. And the reason we finally did that is because one day, about 2 years ago, it stopped being terrible.
Yeah.
It started being really good. And so it does a really great job. But we're able to mark where the code is so that we can tell it not to do that.
Sure.
Yeah, because we don't want to translate the code. So the result is actually very, very nice. So it's done via just a service, an AI service behind the scene. But it's really great because now we have English and we have Spanish, and soon we'll have other languages. And yeah, the goal is just to help make things more and more accessible.
I love this. I'm sorry. I said it might be a trick question because I actually had this conversation with Fabien actually about documentation.
Okay, I would love to know.
No, but because like you said, documentation changes so quickly. It's an impossible task to have quality translations and might not be really useful as well. But I can see why for the actual SymfonyCasts, it's interesting because it's more long-term. Because I feel like even if there are new features, what you wrote 5 years ago might still be useful for someone on an older version or just learning about the concepts.
Yeah, and we don't edit it.
It's more long-term. There's a date, it might be outdated, but you can still use it. So I love that. And for me, I know the documentation is hard to translate, even for Drupal, for example. That's why we have local communities that create new knowledge bases and tutorials in the language of the country.
So it's not exactly a translation.
Exactly. Well, we have the user guide is translated, but we have people volunteering to do translation. So again, translation for us is a big deal. And it's a contribution. It's credited on Drupal as if you were contributing code, And so, it's more about when I organize a meetup, it's in French. We create this knowledge in French for people who are not fluent enough in English to follow the meetups in English, right? But they still have access to information and quality speakers and stuff like that. So it's a choice, of course. But I think that's the power of open source. People will also create what they need and build up on that. So, of course.
Yeah, and you're right. That whole thing just doesn't work without having those little passionate, independent open source communities in other languages.
Exactly.
Because it's hard.
Yeah, I know. So, well, that was really interesting. I love how maybe down to earth you are about all of this. It's cool. I can feel how passionate you are about it. It's
it makes my job easy because people say like, oh, when you're doing the screencast, you sound so excited. It's like, because I am that excited. Because there's something new and amazing I'm showing, and things are popping out of the screen. Like, what's not exciting about this? This is great.
So to wrap up, what would you say is the most important thing you've learned about, teaching and sharing knowledge?
That you should, it sounds basic, whatever you're teaching should be telling a story. And so what I mean by that is you should be building something real that solves a real problem. So try to make things as realistic as possible. I
Mhm.
think that's a lot of people complain about technical documentation because it really is just like, hey, there's a function called this and another function called
Yeah, that's
this.
description.
It's
That's
really
not.
a
Yeah.
reference documentation.
Yeah.
So if you want to teach something, think about that problem that problem that you solved that was very complex. That's the value right there. That you have a solution.
Mhm.
What you want to give to people is the solution.
Sure.
The way to do that is by taking them step by step by step to show them that solution. Don't not just mention, I solved this problem. I used these 6 functions.
Yeah.
No. Like, show me the first function you used and the results, and then how it tied to the second thing and how they work together, and kind of take me through that journey that you did mentally to get those from the beginning, those 15 steps to the end.
Yeah.
Not just the end.
Understanding the underlying logic so you can reproduce it,
Yeah,
not just
yeah.
blindly following steps.
Yeah. Teach, they say, teach me how to fish,
Yeah, I love this. Cool. Well, I want to finish with a few silly questions.
Uh-oh.
So, we're the Change Mode podcast. So I wanted to ask you about, in life, not just in computer things. If you had permission to do whatever you want for a day, what would you do?
Oh man, for a day.
Yeah.
So I would probably go to Cedar Point. So the Cedar Point is
Yeah.
an American theme park,
Mm-hmm.
a roller coaster park.
Okay.
It's like 4 hours from my house, but it's just incredible. And they have like world records for like tallest and fastest. So it's a weird thing. It's right in the middle of the United States. It's in a state called Ohio. I'm from Michigan, so it's like my rival state. But we let it pass. We let it pass.
Okay.
So I would go to Cedar Point and I would ride rides all day long and stay all the way out. So I have a 7-year-old. So that's part of the reason this is just not realistic at all. I just want to go ride these roller coasters and have my friends with me
Yes.
in line, waiting for 2 hours for a line, hanging out in the sunshine. That would be great.
Oh, you wouldn't even ask for permission to skip the lines?
No, I don't even need to skip the lines. Well,
Wow.
let's shorten the lines.
So,
because here's the other thing. Now that I'm 39, if there was no lines, I would my brain would break. So they're like the lines are now, once you're like over 35, the lines are recovery time.
I see.
They're actually important.
You're so reasonable. That's amazing. Okay. And so if you could invent a new permission, what would it do?
We really like space.
Yeah.
My wife and I watch a lot of sci-fi. And the permission I would invent is faster than light travel. FTL.
Really?
As simple as that. We don't know what's out there. Maybe we're the only life forms in the universe. We have no idea, right? But that's what I want. Then we can go find out. The idea of time dilation is really depressing. This idea of like, well, what if we got a spot where we could travel really close to the speed of light? First of all, it would still take us hundreds or thousands or millions of years to get to that destination. And even if it only took us 10 years to get there, everyone back on Earth aged 200 years.
Yeah. Interstellar.
The
type of
Interstellar.
story.
Oh, that scene where they go
That
down to that
broke
planet. That exactly. When I think of how depressing it is, that's the scene I think
I
about.
know.
I'm like, oh no, you were up there all by yourself. You had no idea what was happening. So yeah, let's get FTL and then we can go explore.
Breaking physics. Nice. Okay, I like that. And finally, what would you say is your greatest power?
I think I'm really good at playing with kids that are 7 and under.
That's very specific.
Yes.
What happens when he turns 8?
Oh, I don't know. I'm hoping 8. I'm hoping 8 and lower. But I know, like, I'm not great with babies. I mean, I'm fine with them, I guess. But really, once they become like 1 or 2 years old, it just, I don't know, something about them. I want, like, go into a room, I want to cause trouble. So actually, at Cedar Point one year, there was my friends, we had a few families together. And at one point, there was like 3 kids tackling me on the bed, and we're like having this great time. And my best friends looked at me. He's like, this look of like, what is your problem? Because like I get in there and I'm like, let's cause trouble. Like let's fight. Let's wrestle on the bed. Let's have fun. So yeah, I think causing trouble and getting kids riled up too much is probably one of my greatest superpowers.
Nice.
Okay.
So parents, don't leave your kids unattended with Ryan. He's gonna
we'll have a
create
really
a
good
riot.
time. Yeah, but we'll create a riot. Yeah,
Exactly.
We'll finish. And like, here's your kid back, who is now like tearing things off the wall because they're so excited. Sorry.
But if you keep them long enough, maybe then they're tired, and then it becomes a good deal.
Become a deal if I can do it all the way to bedtime. But what if I get tired first?
That's the danger, right? Bite to the cue.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ryan. It
Thanks for having me.
was super great to have you. Very interesting, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for.
Hey, me too. Me
screencasts.
too.
Yeah.
Screencasts, open source, the internet,
Documentation.
web standards,
Just
so
knowledge.
cool things.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
And that's it for our first interview with Ryan Weaver from the Symfony Project and SymfonyCasts. Of course, this conversation could have been much longer, but I didn't want it to become one of these never-ending podcasts that you are going to skip, so hopefully this was just the right amount of information. If you want to know more, obviously you can reach out to Ryan and look at his work. I will link, obviously, all of his socials and the relevant information in the description with the text transcript of this conversation. Now it's time for me to tease you the next guest. It is also an expert in a programming language, but probably not one you're thinking of right now. A lot of developers don't even think of this as a programming language, but it is. And this person proves it by solving the advent of code enigmas with this language. Now, this person is French and is a recognized expert in their field, and I think that's all I'm going to say. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this first episode. If you have feedback, don't hesitate to join the conversation in our community website, community.upsun.com. There you can add comments and feedback and suggest other guests if you want. And that's it for me. Thank you for listening, and see you soon in the next episode of the SymfonyCasts.